So welcome to this episode of Who Gives a Vote. We have Lachlan Cosgrove with us today, the Deputy Mayor of the Fraser Coast Regional Council and Division 6. Councillor Lachlan, welcome to Who Gives a Chat.
Thanks, Stu, and thanks, Carly. Glad to be here. Love your work, Stu. Love what you're doing with this platform. I think it's good to discuss, politics, civic issues, because it's something that all of us can do better to understand, because it does affect our lives ultimately. And to be involved and try to avoid cynicism, I think, is really important. So well done, and thanks for having me.
And Carly, thank you for joining me on short notice. I think you got a phone call as I'm at Parkrun this morning.
I do. You were a bit puffed.
Yeah, I was a bit puffed, and I said, can you join me? I forgot to ask because it's been a hectic week.
It has.
Yeah. And thanks for joining us. You have come in a bit later because we've had some technical difficulties, which often happens with technology, as you would know. You've been in the game, in the audio game before, or in radio. Do you want to talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, that's right. So I know that Mac has done a little bit of work on this podcast previously during the election time. He was working with you, Stu, and used to do radio with Macca, and thankfully he was more on that side of the desk, and we also had very good tech people working at the radio station. So, but yeah, tech can cause headaches. You've got a great setup here though, but let's hope it all holds up and works today for you, mate.
It's a little bit different to when you first came in before you were on council. We were out the front there in the front desk in the office.
Yeah, that's right. But no, it looks great, but you have been having issues. So maybe simpler was better. Who knows?
Yeah, well,
there's a lot of moving parts.
There were issues back then too. I just didn't tell you about.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. Just fake it till you make it.
Yeah, that's right. You are the councillor for Division 6. We actually are your constituents. Both of us reside in Division 6. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your fine division?
Yeah, so it covers Point Vernon, Eli Waters, and a little part of Pyalba. It's one of the most compact areas geographically, so one of the most population dense, which I guess has its advantages because I don't have any unsealed roads for the most part, unlike my colleagues in Div 1 and Div 2 who have a lot of that. But yeah, look, my partner and I bought our first house in Point Vernon in 2020. So we've been happily living in Division 6, which, I always feel it's funny to refer to Division 6 because most of us don't know, they're not thinking, I live in Division 6, you don't think like that.
Yeah.
You live in Point Vernon or Eli Waters or Pyalba. But yeah, great place and really, one of the best parts of the world, of course. And yeah, very proud to have represented Division 6 on the Fraser Coast Regional Council for the past 2 years now.
And you have been on council. You are a representative of council, but you're not representing council today. The words you're speaking today, are they your own?
They are, yes. I'm not giving official council positions or the like, which I'm always careful. I do tend to sometimes give my own personal opinion in a written format or on videos, and I'm always very careful to give that disclaimer because, unfortunately, you just have to be ultimately, because it can be seen as some type of offence to purport to be speaking for the council when you're just giving an individual opinion. But equally, I think it's important for people to know the nuance of what their elected representatives are thinking and what goes into their decision making and their decision making process. So that's why when I can, try to let people in on my thoughts on a matter, if I've dissented on it, or maybe if I've supported something, what has gone into that, notwithstanding that I'm not a decision maker, I'm a decision contributor. The decision maker is the council, and that's something that, realising that has been important for me on the journey, because sometimes you can get emotionally invested in things or, really take decisions that haven't gone the way that you've voted, very hard emotionally, and realising that I'm not a decision maker, I'm a decision contributor. The council is the decision maker. That's really important. So that just goes to, the disclaimer that I only speak for me, unless being very specific about a council motion or something.
I actually think that's a good point too, that you're not a decision maker, you're a contributor. I think that's an important thing when I see in a lot of the community chats and things on Facebook. That's an important thing for constituents to also remember, because I often see like targeted things at this person did this. No, they didn't do this. This was something that the whole council voted on. It didn't come down to one person.
But when you're speaking to a councillor or your representative, do you want to know what the council view is, or do you want to know what their view is? I mean, I think
it depends on whether I'm talking to them about a particular council matter, I guess, and I'd probably prefer that I get both of those things in the same conversation. The council believes this. My personal opinion is this, but however, our council has decided this. I'm one of however many votes.
The thing I've found frustrating in the new version of councils throughout Queensland is the perception that if there's a thing coming to a vote, and one of those things that came to a vote early on for you was the Sheraton Hotel, is that you couldn't talk about your personal opinion until the vote was done, which to me is a redundant thing. How can you not tell your community how you feel about something before you vote? Is that, do you agree? Do you think that's a backward?
Yeah, look, I think potentially, and David Lewis would be a good person to talk to this about because he has that legal background and he did proffer some opinions at that time. But I think that as candidates, we were provided with very conservative advice on that. And, you know, the last thing you're looking to do as a candidate is immediately put your foot in it from a legal or conduct perspective. So everyone sort of
was very cautious,
walking on broken eggshells about that. I think I found a way forward. I spoke about on that issue during the election, which was a topical election issue at the time. I spoke about Esplanade building heights and my view on that, and communicated that clearly. Notwithstanding that, you know, as a councillor on planning applications, you are required to assess the officer's report and the final officer's report before you make a final decision. And if you were to say, I'm voting against this application no matter what, before that point, you would be excluded with a conflict of interest, right? So, you know, the last thing that anyone wanted to do was not be able to, you know, vote on the issue when it came to council. So, but in saying that, I think some of us, I think my approach did give a clear indication as to where I stood on Esplanade building heights, and you probably got the picture, notwithstanding that, I didn't give a view on that specific application, and that keeps you in the clear. Some people probably didn't give any view or were really almost avoidant about talking about it at all, and that's not good. I think you're 100% right, Stu, that's not good. If we can't openly discuss things in a democratic system, it gets quite clunky, and it's not best for democratic outcomes ultimately.
And by the time it came to voting day, every second person, because I was handing out at pre-poll and election day near Lockie for quite a bit, and the other candidates, and every second person it was mentioning it, and every second person that wanted to talk to you was mentioning it. Yeah,
and which was interesting is that every second person, but not every second person had the same view. Some were supportive of it and some were against it.
Definitely.
Yep. But going on that, the issue I have, I suppose, is that there should be nothing wrong with you saying, I either agree with the principles of the planning scheme on height limits and I would support applications based on that, or I disagree with the planning scheme and the height limits and I'll be moving to make those amendments. That would be a fair thing to say, wouldn't it?
Look, I think one of the issues, and it's something that I'd like to work towards, but there's only so many hours in the day, is trying to simplify for the public the planning framework, the Planning Act, planning schemes, because it is incredibly convoluted. And you come in as a layman, and I probably think of myself as a layman plus now. And I'm actually very interested in planning. I actually am thinking about doing some study in the planning space because it's really interesting. But I think the way I describe it is people think of planning and planning applications, particularly big planning applications, as a maths test where the answer has to equal 8 or less. But it's actually an English essay, a persuasive writing task, right? Where you're actually going, give me some Shakespeare on this and how this justifies that. And it's a persuasive writing argument. And when you get into the highest level of assessment for a planning application, which is impact assessment, that's where it goes to. It goes to that persuasive writing English assessment. Mind you, you can write planning schemes to say this is hard and fast. You can do that even at that level. I personally am of the view that you probably don't want to restrict yourself and your economy to that degree. I think there's nuance in everything, and the fact is that when is the last time we've seen any urban renewal on the Esplanade? I think my take on going through that election process that Carly mentioned is that people do want to see progress, but there's also limits. It's not at all costs. And that's basically the view that I espoused during the election campaign, that people would have liked to have seen a compromise, which we have now seen, essentially. I think it's still probably too big for some people's taste, but I don't think the overwhelming sentiment was stop all progress. I don't think that was the overwhelming sentiment.
We are going to unpack that very issue. We'll go through that as one of our topics. If you talk about it now, we'll only have one topic.
Sorry.
No.
You can have a lot of editing.
Yeah, you are the deputy mayor, and I mean, who hasn't been? 66% of the people here have been there. Yeah. So I have some understanding of what you're about to go through and where that space that you've been in. It's an exciting space. There are only two positions, I guess, on council where you are you are the mayor or you are the deputy mayor. Everyone, you are a councillor. So this is it's a position of representation, and it's exciting for you, obviously. Do you want to talk to me about the process of leading up and how you became deputy mayor?
Yeah, so, and I know you have some thoughts on this, Stuart, and I'd love to get into your thoughts, because I think we're somewhat simpatico on that. But look, the culture within the group, I will say, after the election, you had 6 continuing councillors, or 5 in the mayor, and 5 first-term councillors, myself being one of those. But I would say that there was a carryover culture of rotating the position annually, and I would say, in discussion with colleagues, that is still seen as the prevailing culture of the group. So for that reason, we rotate and there's pros and cons to different approaches, but we rotate the position yearly. So
what is the thinking behind that?
So I think the thinking is that it's an opportunity for councillors to grow in the role, essentially. I think it's really positive from the perspective of people probably don't realise. They think of their divisional councillor as my councillor, and to a degree that's right, but as we mentioned earlier, it's 6 hands that go in the air to make a decision. So I think rotating it to some degree is good because it allows the broader Fraser Coast community to get to know more of their councillors, because we are ultimately everyone's councillors from a decision-making point of view. I'm making decisions that affect colleagues, divisions, and otherwise. So I think it is good for, whilst they may not be able to, from an electoral sense, impact anyone other than their divisional councillor and the mayor. We represent the entire Fraser Coast, and so from that perspective, it's good. And the other one is, that sort of almost professional development for councillors is the prevailing argument. I do think it's too often, and I think that there's a risk of sort of navel gazing and too much internal machinations focusing on ourselves when we should be focused on the community. I've had those conversations in private with colleagues, and I already have in my head that I don't know if is it a valedictory speech at the end of this year of being deputy, I will be putting forward that the next council should be thinking about longer stints in the role, whether that's a 1 year, 3 year, or a 2 and 2. That'll ultimately be a matter for the next council. But I think from a community point of view, it is probably better to have that stability of leadership, notwithstanding that we have had stability of leadership. Councillor Paul Truscott did a great job. Councillor Sarah Farage did a great job. I hope to do a great job as well. Notwithstanding, I think that we should look at longer terms, or the next council should in the next term of council. As it happens, I'll obviously have conversations with colleagues towards the end of this year, but I'm only looking to do 1 year in the role and then pass the torch. And so that's the most likely scenario. But I will be making that point in the chamber at the end of this year, in April next year, to say, let's maybe think about just calming down, because you could end up in a situation, I don't think it is the case with this current group, where you got real sort of cliquey, you got politicking, and it's just a waste of time to be thinking about yourselves and one role, because you can spend 6 months on internal machinations around a single political appointment, so to speak, which is not in the best interest of the community. So, thankfully, it's I guess a methodical process in this group, and there's not that. I don't think we are spending time navel gazing on it, but nonetheless, they're the points I'll be taking forward. I think you probably think fairly similar,
So,
Stu.
yeah, and let me tell you why I have an issue with it above, like, the broader level issues that I have. The first one is I have an issue with it being a professional development space. It's not a role for a councillor to become a better councillor. It should never be. It is a representative role and a support to the mayor. And ultimately, if a mayor is incapacitated, dies, or is fired, which has happened before, you require an experienced, rational, effective leader to come in and take that place and have an understanding of how the role works. Now, if you consider some of the things that the mayor's responsible for, the local disaster management group, which to me is the most important responsive part, it's the sharp end of the sword when you're dealing with disasters. So are you now on the disaster management group?
We're having discussions around that at the moment. It doesn't automatically follow the role of deputy mayor, and I actually think that is problematic as well. So we are going to talk about the LDMG, because I've sort of already had the conversation with the mayor. Do we need, if we're going to continue this culture of yearly rotation, perhaps we should have more stability in that role. Previously...
And then what happens if the mayor's out and you become the chair of the...
Yeah. So ultimately... it's
sorry, George. Stuart just ran you over with a bus or something.
But this is
yes,
what...
I'm aware.
This is the role of the deputy mayor. Your job is to represent and be the mayor when the mayor is not available in citizenship ceremonies, in protocols, in processes, in chairing meetings. And that takes more than a year to get used to. And I'm sure that Paul Truscott, very experienced, he would know exactly what he's doing. He would have come into that role, and he would have come into the role running. Sarah Farage is an exceptional, hard-working person, but she would have come in and gone, they would have taken a while to get used to it. And the same with you. Like you are, it's going to take a little while, and all those processes of getting it in place, the staff and the executive onboarding you as the deputy mayor it doesn't take days, it takes weeks. So you have all these things. Then the community learns that you're the deputy mayor, and within them learning, that takes 6 months to 8 months sometimes. Then you're transitioned out of the role, and what do they think? You got fired. What did you do wrong to get? And it just creates to me instability. And then on top of that, it's horse trading, and it happens. Whether it happened in this council, is that discussions now will lead that if I do this, then next election or next cycle you'll support me, and then it means that you have to have there is that agreement that has to follow, which sometimes can impact other decisions and other votes. I just think it's unhealthy. I'm not a fan of it, and I think those reasons are pretty valid. And I think
just from a resident's point of view, the first thing that comes to my mind when you talk about something like that is, should any of the roles be just have a go? It's your turn to have a go roles?
No. No. Every councillor is elected not because we want to teach them how to be a councillor, because based on everything they've said and their qualities and their experience, you are voted in based on your potential. Based on your experience and your potential. This next election, you'll be re-elected based on your results. So, there's a difference and a distinction. the deputy mayor role is not a come try. It's not a professional development. It's not my turn now.
And my understanding, I've been told from a previous deputy mayor, is it's a bit of a workhorse role too, because the mayor often obviously has a lot of forward-facing engagements. The deputy mayor role is a bit of a workhorse role, I've been told, but maybe that person was over-conflating.
Well, to be clear, that wasn't me.
No, it wasn't Stuart.
Yeah. I was very lucky to have be a deputy mayor under one of the most brilliant leaders in Jared O'Connell. He was just fantastic human and a fantastic mayor. So my experience was just really amazing. But I guess they're my views, and we can differ on those. But I'm sure you can see my rationale.
I almost entirely agree with what you're saying, Stu. I do. And, speaking to George about it, he actually said there's a council where it's a smaller council, but within the term, I think they do 7 months each.
Heaven help me! That's just terrible.
Yeah, so it's literally just seen as a rotation like that. And I have to say, I'm more on your way of thinking. So, hopefully the rest of the team sees this and culturally thinks about it.
Well, you're not going to have to convince this council. You're going to have to convince the next one.
Well, if I'm there, as I said, it's a matter...
And us, the voters over here.
It's a matter for the next council. But, I think yearly is too often, and I have said that to colleagues privately. I was actually going to say it in the speech that I gave on the day.
Press record on, just play this. Just put it up on just say, here's a video I prepared earlier, a year earlier.
Yeah, look, but I will say, though, that I think that notwithstanding that sort of learning curve going into a new role, that Councillors Truscott and Farage did do a great job. I certainly wouldn't have thought about... the only reason I put my hand up now is because I feel like I'm capable, and I also feel like I have... I've not plateaued, but I've smoothed out a little bit on the learning curve of standard councillor. Certainly I didn't feel that before this point in the term. And so, yeah, but I'm more on your school of thought than I don't think... that it should be seen as a professional development thing. I'm just saying that's what I think is seen as part of it.
While opportunities there, right? While it is seen as a professional development thing, you may as well.
Yeah. Look. But ultimately, I think that the people who one thing I will say is that one of the really gratifying things about being successfully elected is that it's a vote of confidence from your colleagues who work with you, who know you the best, essentially, in terms of how you work. And I, to be frank, in my remarks sort of asking for support, I didn't really pitch hard because I actually said that. I said, you guys know how I operate. You know how I work day in, day out and what I contribute, positives, negatives to my character. You're the best to make that assessment, and any speech I'm going to make is not going to change that. So to then receive support is fantastic. But I think you're onto something, Stu. It's something that I'll be putting forward, and notwithstanding we have the yearly rotation, if there was no one else putting their hand up at the end of this year, I would obviously continue.
That was going to be my question too. Is the current person not allowed to put their hand up at all?
No, you can.
They absolutely are, but culture is important. Yeah. Right. So that
so it's an unwritten rule.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. It's ultimately we could appoint it on the first. You literally call a special meeting before your first ordinary meeting, and you appoint a deputy mayor. You could ultimately do that, and we put in this will be revised, reviewed in the next year. Yeah. And a meeting date.
And when I was in council,
you could just not put that.
When I was in council, I made an amendment every single vote to remove that very thing, because I just fundamentally, I just don't like it. Well, let's move on though, because we have talked about that. You are right. You do like to have a bit of a chat.
Yeah, sorry, Stu.
No, that's right.
Well, you're with to have a chat, so we're in a bit of strife here.
So we've got two questions. One you said was positive, the other's negative. So I'll get you to ask the negative one to make it positive, and I'll ask the positive one.
Remind me what my negative one was.
I'll say, what was your highlight?
Oh, okay, yep.
What has been your highlight so far in the 2 years that you've been on council?
I think my highlight so far is something that I don't want to put the kibosh on it. That hasn't happened as yet. But when we were looking at the Esplanade Master Plan, which has been a long process, we got to a point where the organisation put forward a report saying here are 20 priority projects, might have been 17, for sort of priority within the Esplanade Master Plan. So it has identified, a range of aspirations, I guess. We also did some more detailed work starting at the Point Vernon end. So there has been a higher level of detail that's built off the top of that. I made the point that if you have a list of 17 priorities, you don't have priorities, you have a list. And so I sort of was willing to go back and forth, but I plucked out Esplanade path widening as let's just make that priority, because I think you should, as much as you can, pick one thing and hammer it out till it's done, because that's just the reality. You've always got multiple balls in the air as a council, but I just thought 17 was not pointed enough. It was not.
They need to be numbered.
Who knows what's going to happen? If you say these are our 17 priorities, you haven't got priorities, you've got a list. So I moved an amendment on the day to say the number one priority is widening the Esplanade pathway from the Urangan Pier to Paraweena Park. That was supported by colleagues, and now we are seeing that in the planning flow through into the 10-year capital plan. So we will see that. And
I've seen some work on the path at Point Vernon.
Yeah, where they've sort of just got rid of the grass. I don't know if that is preliminary work or if that's just like a parks maintenance thing. But regardless, to actually see an idea that I put forward and a something that I've pointed out and made an amendment to the approach was supported by colleagues, and now seeing that flow through into the capital plan. As I said, don't want to put the kibosh in it because nothing is budgeted until you're in the financial year that you're in, right? 10-year capital plans can change. But nonetheless, to see that at this point is gratifying, and let's hope that we see that path widened because there is a lot of conflict and sort of issues, notwithstanding a debate that you guys have had a very good conversation around with the e-vehicles and the like, but we ultimately want a safe, the path needs love, right? We've done Esplanade walking tours. The paths were some of the pavers. There was a plaque that said laid in 1988, which is the same year I was born. If my creaky knees are anything to go by, that path needs a bit of love. I think it's time. The Esplanade is a key livability and tourism asset. It
gets a lot of love, the pathway from users.
Yeah, but there's a lot of uneven parts, and it's time. So,
and that was one of your election letter out to your constituents, as I was one of them, was accessibility and paths and that kind of thing. So
yeah, look, I think ultimately we've now got the 2020 Walkables community legislation, which means that when you do greenfield development, so you've got just blank sites that get subdivided and new things, you'll have at least a footpath put on one side. Unfortunately, though, all the historic development we've got through the region, there's no footpaths, and they're just so key, particularly for a community where we are, 13 years older than the median age of Queensland. People, to be able to get around and experience life, they need safe paths, and I would love to see us be able to afford a retrofitting for all these older suburbs, but the cost is always, the impediment. But yeah, footpaths are so important, and as I said, I think if you live within a radius of the Esplanade, you're down there a lot.
Yeah.
And so to make it better, the pathway is one thing. There's a lot of other things we can and need to do as well. So seeing that come to fruition from an amendment that I made, I'd say that was the one thing that made me think, oh, maybe, if I grind away long enough here, I can make a difference.
Yeah.
But as I said, I want to see the concrete or whatever it is in the ground first. But
all right. So on the opposite side of that, what has been your biggest challenge or difficulty that you may not have realised prior to becoming a councillor, but you do now.
I think that one of the issues is, which ultimately probably comes back to, myself, the personal discipline, is the discipline of switching off, and particularly the discipline of switching off social media toxicity.
Yeah.
May not come as it might seem a surprise to some people, but it can get quite toxic if you.
It is.
If you want to find a bad word said about yourself as a councillor,
Pop on a Facebook.
yeah, it's pretty easily found, particularly if you are a councillor such as myself, who, will proffer something that might have two different sides. There's very few things that have 100% support, right?
You would have copped it about the caravan park, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. But as I said, that's one of the things is, and why I take it back to personal discipline. It's like, put the phone down. Don't look in the more toxic spaces that do exist.
Spend time in the garden, not the weeds a bit.
Yeah, but as Stu said to me when we caught up for a coffee, I think we had one coffee a year ago or something, and if you're not getting complaints or there's not offending some people, you're probably not doing the job right. So, but
I feel like that about sport.
You can't be evasive with your answers. Well, you can be, and you can get elected. Like, the political speak is a thing, but to me, I don't think there's any value in hiding under veiled responses. What you do is you say what you think.
Yep.
And I think that's refreshing, but that comes at a cost. It comes at a cost of criticism, which I when I was on council, it didn't bother me as much as it bothered other people. What someone once said to me, it was a politician. He said, "Don't worry if they're saying bad things about you. Worry if they're not talking about you at all." Yeah.
And look, as I said,
Discipline.
I'm really conscious of the fact that I have a 3-year-old boy and a partner, and I need to, particularly with the new deputy responsibilities as well. I'm going to have to really be conscious of making that time and switching off. And boundaries, because ultimately,
don't talk to Stuart about that. He doesn't have great work-life boundaries.
I'm getting better. I'll tell you what I do, which is something that Jazara, my daughter, initiated. Well, we had a discussion about it. We have a coffee every morning. My wife, Jazara, and I, we sort of get up really early, and then we go about our day, and that's a ritual for us. But we have this little bowl that sits in the middle of the table, and when we sit down, before we sit down, we have to place our devices in that bowl.
Do you have to put your glasses into?
I don't wear these glasses when I'm I'm not actually wearing them now either. I don't wear any meta glasses, so they're away as well, or I turn them off. But no technology in it at the time, and it's that putting it into the bowl is a symbol to everyone else around the couch that I'm here and I'm present and I see you. Like the Zulu and the Zulu greeting is I see you. I see you. In other words, I'm here, I'm present, and I'm ready to be with you. And I think that's a skill that you've really got to learn.
Absolutely. I've really been trying to be. Well, I am strict on myself with meal times, particularly. Sitting down with Alfie and Mikola, and making sure that I am present, because there's a lot going on. I'm busy, Mikola's busy, but not to downplay the importance of the role that I hold at the moment, and I'm honoured to be in that. But there's the board that was the Harvey Bay Council, and then it's gone to Fraser Coast Council and other than S. Taylor, I think, who are all these people? And that's the reality of where I'll just be a name written in, with the gold stickers or whatever they use on that board. But Alfie will always remember if his dad was there, So and it's one of the the paradoxes of public life, is that you can be taken away from your family, but thankfully council is you live you're not going away to Brisbane or Canberra or anything like that. So I'm acutely aware of that. And these things are, they're not good for a lot of us, and we all should need to be.
They're a blessing and a curse.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I would say, spending too much time getting into the minutiae of social media toxicity has been the biggest negative. But I also know that I hold the key to
Cutting that off,
do
turning
better,
it
and just
off.
not looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you improved?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
I imagine being green at the beginning, that's a lot harder because you're there, you want to learn, you want to prove yourself, you want to, so that's going to be a little bit harder at the beginning. So that's something that you develop over time, I imagine.
Wayne Bennett says you can take this professionally or you can take it personally. And I think that is a really important part of your role, is the criticism that people, they're trying to articulate something that maybe they're not able to articulate in a rational way, that it's energy and its enthusiasm and its emotion. Your job is to take their personalised comment and professionalise a response and reflect and say, from that, what can I get from that? Even that horrible thing that they said, what can I get from that? And self-reflection, is there something that I need to do better? No, there's not. Okay, I'm satisfied, keep moving, or yes, there is. And that's the difference between taking something personally and taking it professionally. Are you better at that?
Yeah, I am better at that. And I think as well, being in the role longer, I think because you're right, Carly, like you start out and unless you've been in the role of councillor, as Stuart knows, you have no idea what it's like until you have some thoughts that you might, but the reality is different. But I think now the stark difference between people online and people in person is, people don't behave.
There's no filter online.
Yeah. And I've seen people who literally, were giving me a serve online and they don't do that in person, So
the civility's lost when it's just typing.
That's right. And I think as well, it's elevated all of our opinions to the entire world. Yeah. Whereas, you might say something down at the pub back in the day and someone would say, well, that's a stupid idea. And it doesn't go further than that, But now,
Yeah, as Michelle Obama says, it's hard to hate up close. And I think that's the difference between social media and that personal interaction. That's why when people used to send me emails, I'd call them. You just call them.
Yep.
You can get a lot more sorted out in that time as well. I do want to talk about election commitments, but we have spent a bit of time talking about this stuff, which is great. So you did make a number of election commitments or aspirations. It depends on how you look at them. And I don't necessarily want to go through each and every one of them. I mean, what I can do is I go through in a list. I don't want to go through them and ask you to respond this or that. What I'm more interested in is that when you were coming into this role, you had an idea about what a councillor was, what a councillor did, and what a councillor could achieve. And on the basis of that information, you've made commitments to advocate for key issues. Some of those you'll succeed and others you will fall short. And that's meant to happen. You're not supposed to make aspirational commitments for everything and achieve them. It's not possible. But what you've sort of talked about was dealing with traffic congestion, road safety, accessible, connected communities, championing community safety, better green spaces, completion of the Maryborough Rail Trail. So when I read those things out to you, I guess, which ones sort of do you go, yeah, I've really done well with those? Which ones have you struggled with? And also, on reflection, which ones do you think, that probably is not a council issue, or I thought I could do more?
It's no longer a priority to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think I'd like to say accessible and connected communities with the, making the Esplanade great for everyone with the path widening. So hopefully, but as I say, I have bigger aspirations than I'll probably ever see in my time. Like, I think we should be retrofitting old suburbs with at least a footpath on one side of the street. So that aspiration will never fade, essentially. One thing I have learnt from my colleagues who are in their some third, fourth term is that it's a grinding marathon. It's not a sprint, because I'm seeing, like councillors Paul Truscott and Daniel Sanderson having things delivered that they've been advocating for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I think it can be seen as a frustration, but equally it's like Rome wasn't built in a day, so just keep at it. I think the champion community safety, I took that to a motion for council to establish a community safety advisory committee. The report came back, and I ultimately formed the view that if we can't be stepping out of our lane, it's not financially responsible for us to step out of our lane and try to do policing, essentially, right? So, and I said in the chamber that, I'm responding to a community sentiment, and I think so. You asked, like, what did you maybe get wrong going in? You go there because you want to represent the community and champion the community's interests, but sometimes it's in the community's interest to not allow the levels of government blame game, scapegoating that goes on. Like, I'll give you a clear example on community safety. There were advocates within the community that council should hire people in to put on high-vis vests and waggle their fingers at people in the Maryborough CBD. Now, they would have no move-on powers. They would be, called community safety officers for us to spend ratepayers' money on what is a policing responsibility, and the police are best equipped to do. So I think the reality is that if you even give that any air to say, oh yeah, we'll think about that idea, or that's a good idea, you are allowing the state government to sort of allow for the blur around who's responsible for this. And so if you want
and that's
results,
not in your budget. That's not your
Yeah, if you want results, or you want to try to lobby, you really need to make sure that you have in your sights the right target, because by going, oh, well, we want the council or the state or maybe the feds to do something, it's just too meandering, and it doesn't allow the community to focus its interest on the true area of responsibility.
And I see the community talk a lot about that online in regards to homelessness.
And state governments are very good at giving
pushing
or funding their responsibility through council. So we'll give you this money for 3 years to do a community safety initiative. That's our responsibility, but we're going to give you the money to do it. Council goes, oh, we'll take that money.
And
we'll
then 3 years later.
3 years later, no more money.
But you need to do it still.
But the community now expects you to deliver that program, to deliver that service, but it's not funded.
Yeah, the term we use in council is cost shifting. It's, we're not in the position in the Fraser Coast, thankfully, but there's councils that are literally running childcare centres in some areas of Queensland because the private sector's not doing it. And ultimately you have community-minded people who become councillors who want to see the best for their community, and they
need boundaries.
Yeah, but they're
like
just
home.
They're just like they become the government of last resort. And one of the things that I like to mention is that for every taxation dollar that is taken in Australia, 80 cents goes to the feds, 17 cents to the state, 3 cents to local councils through rates as a taxation.
And the feds and the state they've got more ways to increase their revenue than a local council.
Absolutely.
You're very limited as a local council.
Well, you could build more houses.
Yeah. So, and look, we're involved in, Local Government Association of Queensland campaigns for the feds are the ones who have the big levers, right, to get more money into local roads and the like. And we've seen as a percentage of gross national taxation, the funding flow from the federal government down into local government in the 90s was above 1% of gross national taxation ended up going to councils. It's increased in dollar terms, but in real terms it's dropped now to 0.51%. So we've got less of our federal of our federal taxes ending up in councils. Now, sure, there should be boundaries around what councils can spend federal money on, and you get into, some people mention constitutional arguments, because ultimately anything council does is ultimately, from a constitutional perspective, a state responsibility. But look, things like roads and infrastructure, the nation needs that, and the ones with the biggest levers to pull are the feds.
Are you talking like the state roads, or are you talking about local roads
even
as well?
Even into local roads? I don't know. I don't understand off the top of my head, but of the 77 councils in Queensland, more than half are considered to be under financial stress.
Yeah.
So, I went to the National Conference of Local Government. The local government minister in the feds was there, and she sort of just had no other answer other than, well, raise rates, And it's like, well, the community is not an endless tap that you can just. People are struggling. The economy is dire.
And Harvey Bay is a lower socio-economic area.
Absolutely. So, I really think that it's about priorities at any level of government, and I don't want to get into too much sort of state or federal politics, but I definitely think there's priorities that could change to make sure that people can still afford to be in a home, which is an admirable social goal that we should be working towards, and more people are struggling with for many reasons. But when they're in that home as well, they need to have livability, and that's where I see councils being our prime responsibility, is to make sure that the people that we do have, their livability and way of life is protected first, before we just start piling more people in, so to speak. But sorry. Long-winded answer, as I forewarned you.
Before anyone has a constitutional comment on this podcast, we'll spell out what you were explaining, is that federal governments can't fund local governments, only state governments can. So the way that federal governments fund local governments is through federal assistance grants
and things.
And they pay the state governments, but it's earmarked to the local governments, and those grants are drying up considerably. Like you said, reduced by half, and I guess the federal government.
But they want you to keep the responsibilities.
Yeah. So moving on to something a little less controversial, the Sheraton Hotel in Harvey Bay went through the Planning and Environment Court, and they approved this high-rise with some agreed outcomes between both parties. The residential side, which was 18 stories, has been dropped to a very small 16 stories, and the hotel to 12, and that obviously the hotel's at the front, so it gives it a bit more of a constant,
not as harsh.
Yeah, the setback feels a bit better. You voted against the council resolution, was that correct? Or
Yeah. I voted against the application. Yep.
Yep. Would you have voted against it if it was 16 stories and 12?
It's a little bit of what if, so I can't say definitively, Stu, but...
think of it like an English essay rather than a maths equation.
I can't say definitively, but I will say non-definitively, no, I don't think I would have.
Yeah.
Look, going back to that, the election stuff, I said very clearly that I think people are looking for progress, and that's that. I truly believe that is the
sustainable
sense.
And healthy progress.
Yes, sustainable and healthy progress. Well put, Kylie. So I said that if we did get applications bigger than the planning scheme, perhaps we should look at compromises between the 8 to 14 story level. I said to you before we went on air, though, Stu, that in my mind, around a planning aspect, in an ideal world where there was no such thing as economic viability or buildability or the like, I don't think there's any reason for us to go on the Esplanade proper higher than 8 stories. If you're interested in what sort of informs that view, I think one of the best sort of greenfield developments around in the Sunshine Coast is Boccarina. They've stuck to a strict 8-story limit.
Yeah.
Amazing public realm out the front.
Yeah.
Restaurants and dining and ice cream shops and cafes down the bottom. We will always be unique in Harvey Bay, but I see that as an example that not everyone will know. Obviously,
Yeah.
you know it, Carly. I think it's a great example of what the Esplanade should be for urban renewal.
But
not,
still keeping Harvey Bay.
correct. Notwithstanding, though, the realities is that greenfield development is very different to brownfield development. You've got things like economic viability, land assembly. They had to acquire 3, adjacent parcels to be able to put forward an application. And the other thing, and this goes back to people understanding planning, they can apply for whatever they want.
Yeah.
And so then it has to be assessed on that English essay test against the planning scheme by our planners. They recommended to approve. I think on character, the application was just out of whack with the character of Harvey Bay, and I think the character is important as part of tourism product. You don't want to just become another cookie cutter. So I still hold the view, and I as I said, I hold probably the more hard and fast conservative view, in my own opinion, that 8 stories is enough. Yeah. But notwithstanding, that is not to say that I wouldn't. It's not just about height. We need desperately. I'm on the board of Fraser Coast Tourism Events. Once again, not speaking for them, but we desperately need more 5-star accommodation and more accommodation generally to round out our tourism sector. So, notwithstanding that, it's not something that I absolutely love. I respect the court's decision, and I now hope that
it's not an absolute for you. You're willing to look at each thing on its merit.
Look, you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
Not saying that we need economic renewal on the Esplanade. We definitely need that 5. We need to fill that 5-star hole to round out our tourism market. If we could get it before the Olympics, that would be a way to capitalise on an amazing opportunity. But look, my sort of ideological North Star is pragmatism. You've got to do what works in theory, and it's all well and good to say, let's never have any applications above 8 stories, but that's just not how the planning framework...
And that's not really democracy either.
But when I was on council and the Queensland Treasury came and spoke to us about development, and they were talking about multi-storey development, there's a threshold where you can't make money from building.
It's not viable.
Yeah, and so the developer will look at it and go, well, the yield isn't there at 8 stories. You can't build something because all of that work up to 8 stories, and these aren't my words. This is the advice that we got from the Queensland Treasury, and that I'm just reflecting what they would say is that the yield comes from the bigger you build it.
Yeah, the extra stories.
And there is a particularly with 5-star, there is a yield that you need to hit to be able to make it profitable. So, like you said, pragmatism is probably a really important part of the process as well.
And that's informed by, as I said, my assessment going through an election campaign and essentially seeing or having the opportunity to see every single voter and getting a sense that people aren't like definitive, big red X through any progress. They do want to see a renewal, but I think on balance, most people are like, but could we just tone it down a bit? It has been toned down through this decision of the courts, as I said, which I respect.
And look, I come at this with no knowledge, but surely a developer also comes into a council like this and says, I want to build an 18-storey, blah, 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 knowing that it's going to get negotiated down anyway.
Well, they came at 21.
Yeah.
And it did get changed on the day. I think, look, hindsight is 2020. My view was reject the application and negotiate from that side. We might have actually seen a quicker outcome from that, but it's difficult. It's good on the wildlife group for doing all the massive efforts for fundraising. That's a big undertaking. And whilst I don't think you can just have Joe Blow off the street obstructing, a methodical planning process, there shouldn't be. Is it cost prohibitive? Is it too cost prohibitive to get into the get into that legal challenge. They would have had to raise a stack of money. Lawyers aren't cheap. So look, there's no solutions, only trade-offs.
Yeah.
Is one of my one of my favorite quotes. So people, and I think I even mentioned sort of as unique characters. Not saying we're going to be them, but in my speech back in 2024, I mentioned like Noosa and Byron Bay. I went to Noosa recently, and it struck me as a place where they've just been so anti-development. Everything looked tired and just really just run down. And so it's like, I don't think we want to be that. We sit somewhere in between. It's got to be a balance. And yeah.
I lived for 13 years on the Gold Coast, and I don't want it to be like that either.
No.
Moving on to the Torquay Caravan Park, which was another contentious issue that that the community had to manage. And you were one of the vocal voices, very much, and I won't say opposed to, I would say supporting a green space option rather than a caravan park. What was your experience like during that vote and that decision?
Look, there was a very passionate group of people who are in favour of retaining the caravan park, and essentially that's the decision that's been taken. My view is that we are growing rapidly, and if you want to actually maintain livability, our way of life, as you get more and more people,
you need more.
They have less and less space effectively. And I think, the trade-off for me, you look at the sort of limited, I think it's technically called Ron Beaton Park on the western side of the surf club. The surf club's a focal point. It's also a point where, we have safe swims. It is one of the best swimming beaches. And that space, that sort of limited green space that has tree coverage, is so well used.
Yeah.
It's incredibly well used, and I believe if you opened up the other side on the caravan park side, you would see it packed. And the other thing is that from a tourism perspective, we lack mainland tourism product. Now, an oceanfront park isn't probably a product per se, but it is. We don't have a focal point like that. If you actually stand down there and say, if there were no caravans parked here and you pulled the fences down and just that, and would leave the old buildings there, would that be comparable to anything we really have in terms of expanse and space and room to breathe? So, look, that was my view, that it's a growth based thing. It's an equity based thing because we're spending a lot on in Hervey Bay on libraries, on caravan parks. But are we catering to people who maybe don't like libraries or caravan parks from a budgetary perspective? If when we get to the end of the program to renovate Playalba, Scarness and Torquay, we will have spent $30 million. And I think we are under-catered for a nodal hub where, multiple generations, maybe grandma, mum and dad can have lunch across the road while granddad takes the kids to the playground across the road in the big park. Then they can all join up. They can spend hours there. I truly believe you'd get hundreds of people through that space every day, particularly in peak times. I think caravanners, there's 3 private caravan parks within a kilometre of that site. Those caravanners would all use that space for recreation as well. It's done and dusted though. The caravan park is staying. Nonetheless, they were and I try to, in 5 minutes, which is our limit, I try to let people in on my process, and I think about, because let's not be naive as elected representatives, and someone who's thinking about if I'll continue next term, etc. As elected representatives, you think, okay, so who would be my base as a voting base? And it's not people who are looking for someone who has the same view on every single topic, which would just be impossible to think that there's going to be any elected representative who on every single issue will align with you. Sometimes ideology paints people into that thing and they maybe pretend that's the case. But what I want to be known as is someone who is very thoughtful, very considered, very methodical, considers the data, and makes a decision in tandem with community sentiment. And I did reference the fact that
The younger age group.
15 to 45 age bracket
In the
in
survey.
majority supported parkland.
Yep.
And, we have a demographic where our median age is 51. This is based off the last census. I think perhaps it will get older based off the data, 13 years older than the Queensland median age. And I have a lot of people in that older demographic who say to me, we can't just keep building over 50s resorts. I've had people who live in an over 50s resort saying, why are we building another over 50s resort? What impact will that have on healthcare for the local?
Water, infrastructure, healthcare.
All those things. That's development in general. But, on average, as we age, we all do probably have, statistically more need for healthcare and the like. Now, it's ultimately, healthcare is a state responsibility. But if we don't do some things from a council perspective to at least try to make sure that we're appealing to young people, to make sure that there's a good path for people who grow up in Hervey Bay
Yeah,
to
they stay in Hervey Bay if they want to.
If they want to, or the Fraser Coast. But also be attractive, and there's many moving parts to this.
To professionals and...
Yeah, but people to moving here as well. We need to be thinking about that. And so that's not to say that any demographic is more valuable than the other, but the first demographic will suffer if we don't arrest our outstripping the ageing to be more ageing, because Australia is an ageing population.
Yeah.
It's not a good strategy to be more ageing because we just won't get the requisite healthcare. Healthcare is the main space, I think, where we won't get the requisite resources to actually be able to cope that. We have absolutely...
We've got a series coming up on health.
Yes, we do.
We have won the race, and we are AAA gold plated as a retirement destination. We've ticked that box, and it'll keep ticking along regardless. We need to make sure that we can cater for the young working population who can essentially keep the economy ticking along while all those older people have their needs for healthcare and, tradies and spending their money in their retirement and making sure that they're serviced well. So, look, to me, it was a growth issue and it was a way to look at our demographics as well and say, how do we make sure that our older population has a working age population to service them into the future.
And as far as growth goes too, I think that if we are going to start having more development along the Esplanade, if you think of it like New York or like the Gold Coast, the Broadwater Parklands, there's all these high-rises around it and that's their backyard as such. And, a lot of families aren't in the traditional like 4-bedroom house with a backyard anymore. So if that's what things will slowly turn into, you will need more green space. Yeah,
look, when you're looking at density without public realm becomes ghettos. And so I'm acutely aware that when we're looking at things with anywhere increasing density, you need to go, where is the public realm to do the lifting of that? Because if you don't have it, you don't have livability. So, that's a good point, Carly.
Did you have a question about a basketball court? Was that right?
My son had a question about a basketball court, but he was too scared to send in a video question.
What was the basic idea of the question? And Lachlan,
the basketball court in the park across the road from our house was stolen before Christmas, before the school holidays in Christmas, and he wants to know when it's going to be replaced.
Yeah,
just tell him to send a nasty message on social media.
Well, he used my phone and he helped with a snap send solve. I showed him that.
Yeah.
So
I have had this raised by multiple people, Carly, and the answer is quite disappointing in that it wasn't just stolen once. It's been
multiple times.
Twice.
Yeah.
So.
And our suggestion was: is there some kind of security bolts you can put in, or something that will stop people stealing a basketball?
They're definitely,
because it's actually a well-used park for that basketball hoop. I've never seen anyone at the swings, but the basketball hoop all the time.
They are looking at as much as possible anti-theft bolts or whatever they can. But it wasn't just stolen once; it was stolen twice.
Yeah, and they steal the nets off it as well. Some of the people in the street have replaced the nets a few times on it.
And it is a big problem, theft, vandalism, and just disrespect for property that ultimately belongs to the community and all of us.
Yeah. It's widespread. It isn't just the park across the road from my house that my son's got an issue with.
Yes, but I am aware of it, Carly, and the staff are aware of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, to hear that something was stolen, replaced, and then stolen
I know,
again.
it's frustrating.
Yeah, so they're now, I don't know, there's some hold up with the bolts or something like
That's
that, because
fine.
they are looking at. But I said as well,
He's not a ratepayer yet, so my son, so.
look, we represent everyone, Carly, ultimately. But yeah, fingers crossed it'll be replaced ASAP.
I'll let him know. Elliot, it's going to
And-
get replaced ASAP.
And yeah, I don't know if you have capacity, but if you want to point like a camera at it so we can see if it gets stolen next time and actually try to.
My husband was talking this morning. He's like, let's put up a trail cam.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
2028, are you going to run again?
Ooh, straight from the.
Just get straight.
Look, I enjoy the job. I enjoy, it's the best job I've ever had in terms of who I am as a person. I love the policy side of it. I love a lot of the stuff that is not public facing. Being in the room and discussing policies and thinking, you know, if no one else had raised that point, that might have just slipped through to the keeper. That's really, really good. I'll make a final decision. I'm leaning yes, but I'll make it a final decision in tandem with my family when it comes.
Hopefully that includes pickles.
Yes, yeah, Pickle the Jacker Whip. He's a Jack Russell Cross Whippet. So yeah, he'll
mongrel. Yeah,
yeah. I wouldn't recommend as a dog breed. I have to say. But no, he's calming down. He's 5 now. But yeah, look, I would say leaning yes, but obviously the final decision comes down to, you know,
It's best for you and your family.
family, and but if I feel like I still have the drive, commitment, and
Something to contribute.
I will put my hand back up, leaning yes, but yeah, I think I'll give myself a little bit more time to make the final.
Be deputy
decision.
mayor for a while.
Yeah, let's just get through deputy, and then we'll see how we're going.
Well, talking about time, our time has come to an end. You've certainly given us your time, which we appreciate. Did you have anything you wanted to ask before we...
No, we've sorted out Elliot. We're all right.
Lachlan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.